Bonjour programmers. In the last video, we saw about the print function. Um, Today we're going to dive deep into understanding what is variables and data types, which are core concepts in Python programming. By the end of the video, we should have a solid understanding of how to store, categorize, and manipulate data in Python. So imagine a variable as a box where you can store information of any sort. So if you think information, think in terms of, let's pick a person. So what are the information you can know about a person? Like his name, age, height, weight, sex, and all these, when you translate to computers science, like it's basically some sort of data that needs to be stored. So imagine like variables like a box, or it's like a or a placeholder that stores a value. In this case, imagine like temperature is being a box that is storing the value of 72. So let's create a variables in Python. It's very simple. All you need to do is type a variable name. I'm just going to use temperature. You can use temperature, and I've said like 72. So I'm just selecting the interpreter and it's being connected, and the variable is actually created. You can just check the variable by calling or by typing it again, and the variable is 72. So let's create a complete details about the person. So for example, we can create something called first name. I'm going to say Peter. Last name is Griffin. I'm gonna say his age is 62. His weight is overweight, so let's say 100. Now the other one is email. You can just check and say like, yeah, he's a male. I'm gonna say true. Okay, so let's, and all the variables are created. Let's call your first variable, which is first name, and you can say it's Peter. You can call last name, and it's already called the Griffin, and call the age, and let's check his weight. What is his weight that you gave? His weight is 100. Is male. It says you store it as true. So this guy name is Peter Griffin. His age is 62. His weight is 100, and he is a male. So what you did is, all these are called the variable names, and these are the values they are storing inside them. We can also add one more thing, which is his height. Let's say in feet it's 5.7 feet. That's it. So now we just defined a complete person inside using variables, and the values are stored parallel. Now what is declaring a variable? So if you look at other programming languages, what you have to do is you need to explicitly define the data type of this data type of the variable value this variable is holding. So you always need to give a data type. So in other language it would be like string or char, or in this case it would be like they should be writing like int 62, or it could be like int 100, and this could be like bool. I'll get to the data types in the later part, but you should understand that in other languages you should explicitly state the data type of the variable, the data type that the variable is holding. But in Python it is dynamically typed. You just don't need to store anything about the data type of the value. Python automatically knows, and it will store in the back. So that's exactly what I'm trying to say here. So when you're declaring the variables, you don't need to specify the data type of when you create a variable. Python automatically determines the data type based on the value you assign to it. So memory allocation is also a very important thing. So when you create a variable, Python will allocate some memory in the back, and it's just like whenever you call that variable name, it goes to that memory and fetches the value that is stored inside. So there are like two types of memories. That's called the heap and stack memory. So stack and heap memory. So I think it was already there. So It requires one more video to discuss about this memory allocation part, but for now we can just skip and go ahead and understand some of the few basic concepts about variables and data types. So reassigning is a very important thing to know. So if we just go to the variables that we created, let's first name, last name and age. I'll just try to change the weight of Peter Griffin to 110. So I'm gonna say like, hey, the weight is gonna be 110. Now if you call the weight and you check the value, it's not 100, because what it did was it went and checked whether there is an existing variable name called weight. Yes, it was there, and it held a value called 100. Now since the user gave me a new value, so I'm going to change it to 110, and this went ahead and changed to 110. Now that's how you can always change, like as you run the program. The values can be changed, the variable values can be changed as you type them down, and it always takes the newest value that is assigned to that variable name. Now comes the critical part. As I already told, the data types. It's very important concept. It is very simple, but when you write any sort of applications or any programs which are very complicated or intricate, the data types play a very huge role, because without letting Python know like what exactly the data type the variable is holding, it will be very hard to go ahead and use them in your programming or in your algorithms. So data types are categories that tells Python that, hey, this variable name should only hold this sort of values. So for example, if you just scroll to the top, in this case we said first name is like a variable that should hold a data type. This is specifically called string. We'll look into that. So it needs to store string every single time, and last name should only store string. Unless you go down and change it, it'll assume that this last name is storing string. And age is like storing int. Weight variable is storing a data type called int 100, and this is bool. So boolean is basically true or false. So you're gonna let him know that, hey, he's a male or no. Yeah, I'm gonna say he's male, and it's gonna be true. And we are checking his height, and height is like 5.7, which is float. Float is like data that has a decimal point. That's the key difference between integers and floats. So that's exactly that you see in the slide. So the integers, like pretty much what you call is like int. The floats will be represented as float, and strings as str, and bools as bool, bol, bool. So let's randomly define some variable types. For example, let's talk about a car. So car name is like Audi. It's like AUDI, right? Now the car maker is I think it's Volkswagen. I'm not sure. Volkswagen. Then car make year, like which year it was made. I think it's build year. So which year it was built. I think let's put it as 2024. It's stored in 2024. And car color, which is basically red, and number of engines, I think number of cylinders, that's actually good. You're gonna have 5 or I think 8 cylinders. So create some variables. So if you closely observe the way the variable names are stored, it should always start with a letter, or it can start with an underscore. If not, Python will throw an error. The next thing is it should be always alphanumerical, which means it should be from A to Z or 0 to 9, and it should contain only underscore. It should not contain any special characters like @ hashtag, $, percentage. All these cannot be contained, because you'll understand why when I'm discussing about operators in Python. So you'll understand why we cannot use special characters in naming when giving name to your variables. And you shouldn't definitely use Python keywords like if else, def, elif. All these are standard keywords that Python reserved, so you cannot use them when you're creating your variable names. So let's try to go ahead and challenge Python by using something called like this. Hey, I'm gonna use a variable saying that uh, is equal to 45. So it's not possible. So it says it stores a syntax error. So at is not the way you should start. I'll explain this when we get to that part. But this is basically using something called a decorator. So this is not okay because you cannot start your variables with that. What if I say I'm gonna use in between that and say like 45? Still it throws a syntax error. You cannot store a variable with special characters. That's gonna throw an error. Um, so what if I start storing variables with I'm gonna say like one variable. So you cannot start a variable with one, still it throws an error. So what if I'm saying that def is equal to 5? You cannot store because still this is a keyword, reserved word, and you cannot still use it. Can I start a variable with underscore and say like this and say like 45? Yep, you can do it. Python allows to start a variable. Oh, I just put a underscore, so we can do. So that's how you have to keep in mind when you're creating variable names. So you always start with a letter, you use only alphanumericals, but that is basically A to Z and underscore, and you cannot use any of these Python keywords. You'll get comfortable once you just walk through the rest of the concepts, right? So for now, that's about the variable naming. Now this is also very helpful. You should be very comfortable using this function called type. You'll understand what is function in the later classes, but you need to check the type of variable. You can check the data type that the variable is holding using just by using a type function. And we will also sometimes want to convert data type from one type to another, and Python allows us to do it. So it is always the case that integers and floats can be converted to string, but it's not possible to convert strings to integers or floats. So let's try to understand the type function in depth. So for example, we know the first name and last name. Let's see what is the type that we gave to first name and last name. So first name is string basically. In other programming languages, they're statically typed. So what you could have done is you could literally put string in front, and you by default know that hey, Peter is a string. First name stores data which is basically string data types, and you could have literally mentioned as int in programming language like Java or C or C++, but Python you don't need to do it. So that's why it's and you can know which data type is being stored in a variable just by typing it, and you can just know to understand, hey, I want to understand what is the data type of last name, and you can just type last name and you'll get it as a string. Let's type the type of height, which is basically, I think it's float. Yeah, it's float, and you can understand what is his weight. So what is the data type? It's weight. And you can also know what is a car. I mean, is he male or not? Like, let's check what is the variable. It's a boolean. So basically boolean is like it's going to hold two values, either it's true or false. Now let's try to convert, as I said, let's try to convert one from another. So for example, as I said, you can always convert integers and floats to string. So I'm gonna say let's convert let's say like new height and say that str of height. So can you see like whether it is converted? Yep, if you see it it created a it created a single quotation marks around your float, and if you check the new data type and you'll see it's a string. So usually strings can be represented two ways, either like let's say you can represent it using single column, say Stewie, or strings 2 we can represent like uh, Lois. Either ways it should work, so you can use double quote or single quotes. You are still good to go. It's gonna type, and you can just type in like this. I'm say like strings 2 and it's always string. So if you look at it, I'm able to convert integers and float to, let's do also one integer. New weight is like, I'm gonna convert the weight to, and oh, I didn't input the complete path, so I'm just gonna say new weight, and it's a string. But can we convert first name to something called integer? Let's try. It's just very basic sensible thing, right? It's a very common thing. Just imagine you have a bit of characters and you're trying to convert a number. Like, how does the computer is going to respond to that? I will say like new name, or like let's say new first name, and I'm gonna mention that it's gonna be I'm saying like, hey, I just want to convert a name to integer, so I'm using the function called integer and say like first name. Oh, let's say it's first name, and you get a value error. So because you cannot convert a string to an integer, it's not possible, and it'll throw an value error. So that's why you should be always careful of the variables and the data types, and you should be also well versed in using this type function. So whenever you get a value error, it's basically, this is a common error. So as you just develop yourself as a programmer, you'll see a lot of value errors that you'll be committing. It's very simple. When it's a value error, it is basically you're trying to do or mess up with the values that are assigned to your variable. Either you're trying to convert it or you've wrongly assigned it. So if you find this value error, you should always check the data types and the data the data that variable is holding. So that's actually Q. The function that you should keep in top of your mind is type, and you just input the variable name and it will throw you, or it will output the data type name, data type that variable is holding. So that's it for this video. We'll just try to understand the global and local variables when you're discussing the concept of functions. So then it will make sense, like what is a global variable and a local variable. So to summarize, you should have now understand like what is a variable, how to create variables, how to declare variables, what is reassigning and what is data type, and what is type and type conversion. How can you convert a data type from one data type to another? Hope you have a good day. So that's it for this video. If you find anything that's not being discussed in terms of variables, please do comment, and I'll be helping out I'll create a separate video on that